Hello, here's the modified Excel manufacturing template. Now in this video, I'm going to highlight the new functionalities. Now most functionalities are in the reports, but before I demonstrate how they work, first I'm going to add a new product and create a new production. To do that, I simply go to the production section, click on materials, add the materials needed to produce my products. Now I'm going to use generic names, material 1. The template will automatically insert a line below my entry. I'm going to leave the unit of measure blank and enter another material, material 2. Template will repeat the process, entering a line below and automatically calculating the balance in stock. So now I've added 2 raw materials. Next, I'm going to add my finished goods by going to the product section, repeating the process, clicking under the label there. This is going to be product 1 and also product 2. The template will automatically calculate the balance in stock and the average selling price using data from my production section. So step 1, you add your raw material. Step 2, you add your finished goods. Step 3, you need to add your requirements. So you need to tell the templates the quantity of raw materials needed for each production. To do that, you click on the new product build. You indicate the product, the number of raw materials needed, 2. You click enter. The template will automatically insert the needed rows. And here you can then select the raw material you need and the quantity for each unit of product 1. So let's assume that we need 1 unit of material 1. And for material 2, we need 2 units. So I've entered the requirements. So now I can go ahead and add purchases before I create my production. So I go to my expense section and I need to add the raw materials I currently have in my store. To do that, I click on add material restock. The date, I'm going to backdate to March. Next, I'm going to enter if this is credit or paid. The material I'm purchasing, so let's assume this is $100 and I have 10, making 1,000. I'm going to leave the supplier blank. And I'm going to do the same for material 2. Clicking on the add material restock button. I'm going to make use of the same day, which is in the month of March. It's also going to be paid. The second material, this is going to be $200. I have 10 and I'm leaving the supplier blank. So now if we go back to the material section, we should see that our balance has increased respectively by 10. So the 10 units we purchased, if I go to materials, you notice that the balance in stock now reflects 10 and 10. So now we can go ahead and create an actual production. So going to the production section, I'm going to click on new production. I'm going to make this the 5th of March. I'm going to select the product 1. Let's assume we produce 2 units and the average selling price is $500. So once I click enter, the template is going to generate that production. So we should see that the first row is automatically populated. The template will tell us the average cost price using data from my expenses section. And if you want to see a breakdown of all the materials used, you go to the usage summary section. You notice it tells us that to produce this product on this particular day, we made use of these 2 raw materials. The first, we needed 2 quantities, the second 4 quantities. And based on the unit price we entered in the expense section, 2 quantities is the average unit price for each is 100 and the average for each is 200. So that means the total price would be 100 times 2 plus 200 times 4. And if we go back to the production section, we'll see 100 times 2 is 200 plus 200 times 4, which is 800. That's why the cost of goods manufactured is 1,000. So now we've added productions. Next, I'm going to add a sale. Now, before I do that, I'm first going to add a customer. So going to my report section, clicking on the first thumbnail, customers. I'm going to add a generic customer, rows random, a generic phone number, and email address. The template will automatically calculate the outstanding balance at any point in time. So now I'm going to enter a sale. Now the first new functionality we've added is the ability for you to create budgets. So now once you're adding a sale, the template will automatically tell you the total quantity you need to sell in that particular month based on your budget. Now, before that functionality can work, firstly, you need to create a budget. So we're going to go to the report section, and here you notice we have multiple new reports. So first, we have the sales budget. So this is where you create your yearly sales budget and your overhead budget. To the right of this, we have the sales balance report. This enables you to compare the actual, that is what you've actually sold in the sales section, versus your planned, which is the data you entered in the budget section. So you can see the 2 beside each other so you can know the variation between the 2 or if you're meeting your targets. Next, we have the sales budget requirements. Now this works with the sales budget. So here you create your sales budget. For instance, in this month, I need to sell 10 units of product 1. And here the template will automatically generate the raw materials that you need to be able to produce 10 units of product 1. So it's going to list the raw materials with their respective cost, telling you the total cost to be able to meet up with your budget. And lastly, we have the actual versus planned. And this just enables you compare what you've actually sold versus what you planned to sell. So first we're going to create a budget, clicking on the sales budget button, and that takes us to the sales budget section. At the top, you notice it tells us that we can create a budget for a 5-year period. If you look at the right, you notice the 5 years listed, 2019, 20 up until 2023. Now you simply click on any of the years, for instance 2019, it's going to generate the section where you can create the budget for 2019. Notice if I click on 2020, it will automatically update and we should see 2020 listed at the top there. The same for 2021 and so on. So this is a yearly navigation pane where you can navigate from one year budget to the other. Now I'm going to go back to 2019 and I'm going to create my budget. Now the budget table is made up of 13 columns. The first column is the product name column. This will be automatically populated by the template using products in the product section. So recall we added 2 products, product 1 and 2, and that's why if we go to the budget, you notice that we have 2 products listed. So if you add 10 products to your product section, it will automatically list the 10 products here. Next, you indicate the actual amount, that's the total quantity of each product you plan to sell in the corresponding month and the corresponding year. So I'm going to go ahead to March. So let's assume that in the month of March 2019, I plan to sell 10 of product 1 and 12 of product 2. So this is my budget. This is what I plan to sell in this particular month and in this particular year. So now if I go back to my sales section and I click on new sales and I change this to the month of March, which is the month we're currently using for demonstration purposes. Now if I go to paid, once I select the customer and I select the product, the template will automatically tell me what I need to sell to be able to meet up with my budget. So it tells me that in my stock, I have 2 because recall I produced 2 units. The average cost price is 500 Naira because the total cost price was 1,000. So for each product, it's cost me approximately 500 Naira to produce. Next, it tells you the balance to sell. So it tells me that based on my budget, I plan to sell 10 units this month and I haven't sold any. So I still need to sell 10 units. So now let's assume I sell 1 unit. This is the selling price. Once I click enter, it's going to store that in my database. Now, if we should add another sale, you will notice that the balance would have reduced to 9 units. So the template will automatically recognize that we've sold 1 quantity. Let me change the date back to March. So now once I select the product, you notice it tells me the balance that I need to sell is now 9. So that's how all the sections are interconnected. Once you create your budget and you specify the quantity you plan to sell in the current month, the template will automatically tell you in the balance to sell field. And this is dynamic. So what that means is that if I use another month, for instance, this is April, if I select the customer and the product, you notice because there's no budget in April, it tells me 0 because I haven't specified the quantity that I need to sell in the month of April. And just to show how dynamic that is, going back to the budget section, I'm going to add a quantity for April. So I'm going to make this 11 units and 22 units. So 11 units of product 1 and 22 units of product 2 in the year 2019. So if I go to my sales section, click on new sales, I'm going to leave it in April, select the customer and the product, and the template will automatically tell me I need to sell 11 units of this product this particular month. So that's the first new functionality. It enables you to know at any point in time the balance you need to sell in that particular month. Now the next new functionality is going back to the report section. So we covered the sales report. Now here you notice we have a button here where you can be able to generate your overhead budget. Now overhead are recurrent expenses like transportation, utility that you expend on regardless of the products that you produce. So in this section, all you need to do is to document your sales budget. So the quantity of each product you plan to sell. Once you click on the add overhead budget, it takes you to another section where you can create your overhead budget. This is equally for a 5-year period. You notice we have our navigation pane here for the 5 years. The template will automatically generate all expense categories, your direct, things like your factory expenses and so on, and your indirect, things like advertising and so on. Now, the categories are automatically extracted from other sections. So for instance, notice the first direct we have is factory expenses. Now the factory expenses are automatically extracted from the manufacturing report. So if we go to the manufacturing accounts, you notice that this is where you can modify the entries. So if I change this just for demonstration purposes to random, So I've changed the first to random. From initially it was factory expenses, but I changed that to random. So now if I go back to my overhead budget, you'll notice that the template would have automatically changed that to random. So the values here are modified from the manufacturing account. In the same way, the values here, that's your indirect expenses, are modified from the profit and loss statements. So if I go back to my reports, I go back to the manufacturing accounts, I'm just going to undo to return that back to factory expenses. Now going to my profit and loss statement, that's my income statement. This is where you modify the second categories. So here, if I change this from marketing and advertising to random, you notice that it will automatically reflect in the overhead budget section. So there we go. You notice the first now is random. So that's how you modify the categories here. And once you do, it will automatically update for the 5-year period. Now going back to my reports, I'm just going to undo that modification. So in the delivery, what you're going to see here would be advertising and marketing. So we're going to create an overhead budget now. So we're just going to assign random figures. This might not make practical sense, but just for demonstration purposes. So let's assume that in the month of March 2019, we plan to spend $10,000 on factory expenses. We're going to leave the other fields blank. We plan to spend $5,000 on advertising, $1,000 on office expense, and our building we spend $20,000 on a monthly basis. So I've added 4 expenses here: 1 direct expense, which is $10,000 in the month of March, and 3 indirect expenses. So you notice the template will automatically calculate the total direct cost, summing up all what you've listed above. In the same way, to calculate the total indirect cost, summing up all. And lastly, we have the direct labor wages. Now here, recall as I said, the navigation pane here is used to move across years. So this data has been entered for only 2019. If I go to 2020, you notice it's going to be blank because we haven't created an overhead budget for 2020. If I go to 2021, it's also going to be blank. So we've only created a budget for 2019. Now, the last functionality I'm going to demonstrate in this section is pretty self-explanatory. These are the 12 calendar months. If I scroll to the right, you see up until December. You simply double-click on the cell, supply the value for the corresponding month and year. Now, at the top here, you notice we have a transfer expense button. So this is a second feature we added to the template, which enables you to transfer expenses from one particular month to another. So to save you from typing, let's assume we've created a budget for March. Now, in the month of April, we want to replicate the same budget, so we don't want to have to keep typing things over and over again. So all you need to do is to click on the Transfer Expense button. The template is going to ask you which year do you want to transfer from. This is going to be 2019. And we want to transfer from the month of March to, for instance, the month of April. So what we're telling the template is that we want to transfer the values in this column to the column to the right, which is the month of April. So the year 2019 from March to April. So once you click enter, the template will automatically duplicate the values. It's going to tell us the transfer has been added, and we should see the values repeated in April. So you notice 10,000, 5, 1, 20. You can then go ahead and add other expenses not already listed. So that's how the transfer expense functionality works. You indicate the year, the month you're transferring, and the month you're transferring to. So you can only transfer within the same year. So that covers the functionality here. So very similar to the sales budget. All you need to do is just to click on the correct year, select the month, enter the respective planned budget. So we've covered the first 2 new sections, which is our sales budget and our overhead budget. The next thing we're going to do is to go to the sales budget requirements section. As I said earlier on, they're linked together. So recall that in the sales budget, we indicated that we plan to produce in the month of March 10 and 12 for product 1 and 2 respectively. So now in the report section, I can be able to know the raw materials that I need to be able to produce 10. So this is the sales budget requirements section. All you need to do is here, you need to select the year. In this case, it's year 2019. Notice the drop-down list is going to list the 5 calendar years that the template supports. And once you select the year, the next step is you need to indicate the month, which in this case will be March. Once you click refresh, the template will automatically list all products you plan to produce in this particular month, their respective quantities, and the raw materials that you need for each. So you notice it's neatly grouped below each other, product 1 and product 2. For product 1, you need raw material 1 and 2. This is the average unit cost for each raw material. This is the quantity you require for one product. This is what you plan to produce, 10 and 10. This is the raw materials needed, and this is the overall total. And you can be able to see the same for product 2, but the only thing is that for product 2, we haven't entered the raw materials yet. That's why it's blank. So we haven't told the template in the requirements section the raw materials you need for product 2. So the template is unable to generate that report. But that's how this section works. So recall for product 1, we plan to produce 10 units. So it's going to tell you the 10 units for material 1, this is what you need. And for material 2, this is what you need. This is the total cost. So you need approximately 5,000 to be able to produce 10 units of product 1. And in the same way, if you go to the requirements section and I quickly add requirements for product 2. So let's assume this needs only 1 raw material. And that's raw material 2. Let's assume it needs 3 raw material 2s. So 3 units of raw material 2 to produce 1 unit of product 2. So going to the report section and the sales requirements, if I refresh this report, we should now see material 2 listed on the raw materials. So I'm going to retain the year and the month, click on refresh, and we should now see the bottom section. So the top section, recall the total was 5,000, giving us a total here of 5,000. But now that should increase because we now know the requirements for product 2. So product 2 requires raw material 1, which has an average cost of 200. We need 3 units, so 200 times 3. We plan to produce 12, so that means we need 36 units. So 3 for 1 product, we plan to produce 12. We multiply the 2 together, gives us 36. 36 multiplied by the average cost gives us a bit over 7,000. So to produce 12 units of product 2, you need 7,200. And at the top is going to tell you the total estimated raw material cost, which will be the sum of the 2 together. So if you have 50 products, the template will repeat this process neatly under each other. Each product name is going to have this blue header here, so you know the demarcation between each summary. And at the top is going to tell you the grand total. I can do this for any month. If I change this from March to April, and I click refresh, it's going to automatically update the values. So in April, recall we indicated 11 units of product 1 and 22 units of product 2. This is the individual raw material cost. And here we have the grand total, which sums up what you need for product 1 with what you need for product 2. So this is the third section we've added, which enables you to generate your sales budget summary. And this is dynamic depending on the quantities you specify in the sales budget section. So if I change this, for instance, from 10 to only 1, in month of March, if I go back to the report and I refresh, you'll notice it will automatically recognize that update. So going back to the month of March, clicking on refresh, we should now see only 1 under planned production. There we go, only 1. And to produce 1 unit, you need only $500. 500 plus 7,002 gives you 7,700. So that's how this report works. You simply indicate the year, the month, and click the refresh button. Now going back to the reports, so we've covered the first 2 buttons here. We move on to the sales balance. Now this just enables you for any particular month be able to view the actual, that's what you've actually sold, versus what you planned to sell. So that way you can compare the 2 together. You can see the difference if you exceeded your budget or if you're below your planned estimates. Works exactly the same way. At the top, you indicate the year, for instance, 2019. At the bottom, you select the product. So this works on a product basis. So once you indicate the product, it's going to list from January up until December. That's the 12 calendar months. So in the month of January, we haven't indicated any planned budgets. Recall we indicated only for April and for March. So it tells us that in the month of March, we sold 1 and we plan to sell 1. So there's no difference. So we balanced our expectation. So it's white, but it's red in the month of April because we plan to sell 11, but we haven't sold anything. So it's in red. So it's going to be in red whenever you're below your budget, and it's going to be in green whenever you exceed your budget. So in the month of March, if we add another sale, you notice that this is now going to be in green because we exceeded our budget. So going back to my sales section, clicking on new sales, I'm going to make this in the month of March also, to make it the 11th, paid, product 1, and it tells me the balance to sell is 0. So I've already met my budget. But let's assume that I sell another quantity of this particular product. So now we have 2 transactions here. The first and the second, both the same products. So if I go to my reports and I go to my comparison report, you notice that it's now in green because I planned to sell 1 and I actually sold 2. So I exceeded my budget by 1. So it's going to be in green whenever you exceed, it's going to be in red whenever you're below, and it's going to be in white whenever you meet the expectation. And at the bottom, you can see the grand total. So the total that you've sold is 2. The total you plan to sell is 12. So that's how the template is going to automatically generate that for you. All you need to do is to indicate the year, and then you select the particular product, for instance, product 2, and the template automatically updates. So we haven't sold any of the product 2s. So we plan to sell 12 in March, so we're short by 12. We plan to sell 22, we're short by 22. So this is the actual versus planned report. Just enables you to see the two together at any point in time for any product, any year, and over the 12 calendar months. And the last we're going to cover now is the actual versus planned. Now this is more detailed than this. This covers only sales, but this goes for the entire budget. So once you click on it, it opens it up. And what it just enables you to do, it's similar to the report we just covered. The only difference is that it enables you compare what you plan to sell versus your estimated budget to see if it covers your budget. So you simply indicate the year, you select the month, for instance, March, and then you click refresh. So once you do, at the bottom, it's going to break it up in categories. So the first category is going to be your sales category. So it tells you that what you plan to sell in the month of March 2019 is 1,000. What you sold is actually 1,000. Your profit, it tells you here, your total cost, is 7,700. Your actual is 1,000 because you only produced 2. The gross profit is the difference between the two. This balances, that's why it's blank. This is a bit over 6,000. So it's going to tell you the upper category, which is your sales, what you planned versus what you actually sold. Next is going to cover your direct expenses. So you planned to spend 10,000 on your direct expenses. You haven't spent any, so that's why everything is 0. And the same way for your indirect, advertising, you planned 5. So it's going to list all what you planned and then versus what you actually did in the respective months. So at the bottom, you can be able to see the net profit, actual versus planned, the total expense, the total direct cost. And just to show how dynamic this is, we plan to spend 5,000 on marketing. So let's go ahead and add an actual expense in the month of March 2019. So expenses, new expense, the month of March. So I'm going to backdate. It's going to be paid. Advertising, and let's make this 6,000. So the expense has been added. So if I go back to my report section and I go to the last report, now once I refresh it, you always have to refresh whenever you modify any of the source worksheets. The template is now going to tell me here that I plan to spend 500 on marketing, but I actually spent 6,000. So that's how that works. And it's going to sum it at the bottom. And we're going to see the total expenses and the net at the bottom. So that's how the template is dynamic. Now, what this enables you to do is you can be able to see the total cost or the total amount you plan to generate from what you plan to sell versus the total amount you plan to spend. So you see if what you are planning to sell will actually cover what you plan to spend. So we can be able to see that what we plan to spend is 36. But what we plan to sell is only 1,000. So it really doesn't balance. That means we need to increase our planned quantity. Okay, so that's how the template works. And if I change this to April and refresh, you notice the values will automatically update. So what we planned to sell for product sale in April is 11,000. The total cost is this. So that tells us our selling price is too low because we're making a loss. And at the bottom, these are the other expenses. So at the extreme bottom, we can be able to see the net profit planned and the net profit actual. So that's a summary of the new features that has been added to the template. Recall we started from the sales section, where once you select the product, it will automatically tell you the balance that you need to sell. Next, we went to the report section, which enables you to create your sales budget on a monthly basis for a period of 5 years, your overhead budgets on a yearly basis for a period of 5 years. It's going to automatically list your expense categories, direct and indirect. You can transfer expenses using the transfer button. And you can be able to compare what you planned to sell versus what you actually sold. The template will automatically update the values for you. You can be able to know the raw materials you need for any of your production. You simply indicate the year, month, click refresh. The template is going to tell you the total estimated raw material cost at the top. And lastly, you can be able to see your plan versus actual for the entire budget, where it's going to list 3 categories. The first category is the product sale, which has the product and the cost giving you the gross profit. Next, we have our direct expenses and our indirect expenses. And at the extreme bottom, we have the net profit. So that's a summary of the new features added to the manufacturing template.